For white people to even try to argue that this isn't the case is a result of their inferior intellect as a group or their inferior morality. And both things are very important if you're going to be leaders in a multicultural society. So when you see mainstream white denial, right, this is a continuation of Western culture in general. Think about Rome, the gladiators, the arenas, the bloodbath, Caligula, all the people that went along with it who, went into a state of denial to endure, perhaps, but for whatever reason they slipped into denial. Nazi Germany in World War II, the persecutions in Russia, people being put in gulags, the starvations, the purposeful starvation. They purposely starved sections of their population for purposes of control. I'm not going to get into that at this point. The tar and feathering, right? It's saying if you're not in denial and playing stupid, you get tarred and feathered. And so then they have the Asian minority argument, right? Saying, why can't you do as well as these Asian people? For example, the people who fought with the Germans in World War II. So when you consider that and the fact that of white Americans, Germans are the biggest group, it is very obvious to see that, yes, there's this kind of philosophical continuity from the Eurasians that makes it so that they're more likely to succeed in the current American culture that we have. And when you combine that with the organizations, the powerful financial centers and organizations of Asians and whites, the effect of globalism and neocolonialism, the abuses of the comprador elite, and even the left mentioning things such as the wage gap and institutional racism, well, you'd have to be pretty far out of touch with reality. I think white denial is really, it's delusional, It creates delusion, and then we drug people as a society based on their ability, or inability to live a life that is delusional, trapped in this psychological construct which was derived from secret societies that were designed to elevate people who were inferior over other people. Witches, for example, inferior to the martial artists who naturally were natural leaders. People didn't naturally want to follow witches, so they would have to lie and cheat and murder and poison and do despicable things to trick people. And it's the same thing when you talk about kings, right? Kings, not just pagan sorcerers and these Babylonian harlots and gypsies and stuff, but, kings, right? You have this insufficient, inferior pussy king. How does he compare to a great warrior pharaoh, for example? So now what do you have to do? You have to lie and change the culture and reach out to the people who have the same kinds of problems that the king has, the same kind of imperfections, and to glorify those things. They say, oh, it's good to be, say fat, or it's good to be short because you consume less resources or whatever, and to start changing people's attitudes and perceptions of those things. So, Western culture, no matter how you slice it, there is a powerful and intense degree of trying to get people to celebrate characteristics in people that are inferior, and there's this huge degree of hypocrisy. For example, Martin Luther King saying, don't judge people by, the color of their skin, but the content of their character, right? In a society that is completely, dishonorable, unscrupulous, depraved, that values the size of your wallet over the content of your character, where women are arguing the hypergamy is good, and the more educated, they get, the more erroneous and the more rapacious, they become. And of course, Martin Luther King was a Christian, and this goes back to the argument in the Bible when Jesus said that the rich person should give up everything and follow him. Now, if we lived in a society that judged people by the content of their character and not their color of their skin and their ability to adhere to cultures that were that are associated with certain colors of skin, or one color in particularly. What position is every rich white person or every well-off white person, for example, in? Okay? Well, they're going to do, if they were to do the right thing and to emphasize doing the right thing so that they would be respected for the content of their character, one way or another, it would cost them money. Generally speaking, it's going back to give up that money, which is your sin, that ill-gotten gain, your blood money, your eugenic money. Now, I'm not saying white people should just give all their money to black people. Listen to what I am saying, and don't be some white trash piece of shit who's trying to argue against what I'm not saying. For white people to then become equal or greater than black people, which their social status right now has them as greater than black people, generally speaking, the higher social status at least, they would have to, it would cost them power. It would cost them money. So the people who are concerned with the financial status of the white community over the spiritual status or the ethical status, their argument will always be against Christianity. They will always avoid addressing these points with truth. Either they will not address them or they will fabricate evidence. And then you have to consider the direction of society. There is no way to prove the Bible is not true, regardless of who wrote it. Hell, one of the main people in the Bible was a guy who used to persecute Christians named Paul. Okay? One of the main people. So, to draw into question the integrity of the people who compiled the Bible is a futile effort. Because if it's inspired by God and God works in mysterious ways, it doesn't matter even if they meant to lie and they went on and on about how they lied. It was inspired by God and it came out the way it was meant to come out. And to the people who have the right perspective of it, they get the right message. You can't prove which perspective is correct or what the message is, and you can't truly say it's bad for society historically, because we've always had people with ulterior motives and not true Christians in charge. So there is no way to destroy the Bible. The idea is to create weak arguments as to why you shouldn't be a Christian. And as society sees through those arguments more and more, and they see your hypocrisy more and more, they become desensitized to it, and they reach a point where they're so Luciferian, they're so hopelessly Luciferian, their culture, their life, their philosophy, they've passed the torch on the Statue of Liberty, which can symbolize, in my opinion, the flame of the subtle passing of the flame of philosophy, of Luciferian enlightenment, which is a philosophy, a set of philosophies, right? The flame of philosophy and philosophies from them, and their perspective, right? The flame of their perspective and philosophies from group to group, generation to generation, subtly, and it burns more bright as time goes on until it's brighter than the truth, which is symbolized by the sun, the natural brightest star, so to speak, right? It is the truth. Symbolism of this, it's symbolic of truth. And the flame, which is lighted by man, like Prometheus stealing the fire from God, being passed generation to generation, is their lies, their perspective, which came as a result of wanting to make them look good and them being jealous of people who are naturally superior. Think about Lucifer. His philosophy is partially a result, if not a direct result, of his limitations, of who he is, of his insufficiencies of his being. Okay? He made a philosophy that exalts him above everyone else. And these pussies have done the same.